YouTube? Big Lou tapping back in one more again with what it do with Big Lou and FZR2. Baby. Baya. So check it out. For those of you who know who that already is in the thumbnail, you guys already know. If you don't know who that is, because it's just two pictures of the same person, but one from 30 plus years ago, and the other one from more recent. That's none other than the former professional wrestler Lex Luger. Now, if you don't know much about Lex Luger, um, he was a standout college football player. Uh, Went to Penn State and then transferred to Florida. I believe Florida, or I don't think it was off the top of my head. I can't remember if it was Florida or Florida State, but definitely one of them. He said that Penn State, after he got the home visit from Joe Paterno, uh, he was on board. It was very cold, so then he transferred to Florida. After his college career, he went on to go play. He got drafted in the NFL, I believe, by the Packers first. I believe it was the Packers. For some reason, majority of the wrestlers that were drafted or non-drafted free agents, a lot of them played or were in training camp with the Packers. There's many of them. And after Lex Luger, um, I believe he got an injury first. I believe he got an injury first, and then was cut, or he was cut before. He didn't make the final cut, and then from there he went on to play for the I believe Canada CFL. Um, if it wasn't Canada, it was the USFL. The reason why I'm not really tripping on that right now, getting all those details correct, is because I'm planning on doing another few videos on pro wrestlers that play pro football. So when I do those videos, and there's a ton of wrestlers that play pro football, but I'm gonna keep it down to about 10 guys that in my opinion, had the best football pro wrestling careers. So I will get it correct exactly then. Even though I might not be correct what I just said now, I'm not far fetched. I'm in the ballpark. You know what I'm saying? If he didn't play for Florida, it was Florida State. If he didn't go to the CFL, it was USFL. Okay, so we'll get all those details straight. That's not really what this video is about. Okay, so um, Lex Luger was trained by Hiro Matsuda, who trained Hulk Hogan. He's trained Ron Simmons. He's trained a lot of guys, but those are probably the three biggest names I can think of right now off the top of my head. And Lex Luger started off in championship wrestling in Florida. Hiro Matsuda was also a minority owner with that wrestling promotion, that territory in Florida, along with Eddie Graham. And I believe I'm not sure if Dusty Rhodes owned some of that. He might have, but he was definitely one of the top stars there in Florida. Which they, after Eddie Graham committed suicide, Dusty left championship wrestling in Florida and went up to Jim Crockett Promotions in the Carolinas, and he took a lot of guys with him, such as Magnum TA. He took a lot of guys with him. I can't think of Barry Windham. And those were some of the main baby faces there at the company at the time. But he took more guys than that with him, and that was the beginning of the end for championship wrestling in Florida. I believe Lex Luger was the Florida heavyweight champion at one point. I think he was wrestling. He had some back and forth going with Jesse Barr, I believe, or it might have been Mike Rotunda. I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but nonetheless, he went on to have a dynamite career with Jim Crockett Promotions first, with Sting and Rick Steiner, Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, the Road Warriors, Powers of Pain, Dusty Rhodes, Barry Windham, Kevin Sullivan was there, Mike Rotunda was there, uh, the Jones's Army. You had Baron von Raschke there. You had for a short period of time, you had superstar Billy Graham was there. Dutch Mantell was there shortly. You had a lot of guys there. Dick Murdoch. The list goes on and on. that definitely Jim Crockett Promotion was definitely my favorite wrestling growing up as a kid. So Lex Luger, he started out. He came over from Georgia Championship Wrestling shortly after being there at Jim Crockett Promotions. They tell the storyline that he wants to be. He's an associate of the Four Horsemen, right? Everybody knows the Four Horsemen was a big faction in the mid '80s, starting in the mid '80s all the way up until the early the mid '90s in first Jim Crockett Promotions. Then when they got bought out by WCW, or by Ted Turner, it became WCW. They had numerous mix of four horsemen over the years, but everybody knows the original Four Horsemen was Arn Anderson, Ole Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Nature Boy Ric Flair, and J.J. Dillon was the manager. And he was legitly a manager. I mean, from all the stories, J.J. Dillon took care of all the business. Okay, at some point they insert the storyline that Ole Anderson, they have a falling out, but it was really, the real story was his son was wrestling in high school. It might have been college, but I think it was high school, and he wanted to spend more time at home, which was Minnesota. And so they put in the storyline that somehow he got into bad standings with the rest of the Four Horsemen, and they jumped him, and then eventually at some point Lex Luger takes his spot. But the version of the Four Horsemen that are in the WWE Hall of Fame are Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, and Barry Windham. That's the Four Horsemen faction that's in the Hall of Fame. Barry Windham, I don't believe, is in the Hall of Fame as a singles wrestler. Neither is Tully Blanchard. And Lex Luger is not in the Hall of Fame. I believe Lex Luger has done plenty enough to be in that Hall of Fame. Okay, so the story, he's in Jim Crockett Promotion from like 86, 87-ish, somewhere around there, 80, maybe 88, 87, 88, up until like 92, 93, something like that. 92, I think it was. 92 or 93. Then he goes to WWF for 2.5 years, a little over 2 years. Hulk Hogan goes to do movies, and now it's always been said that, Lex Luger came into the WWF to take Hulk Hogan's place as the first he came in as the this conceited character where he would carry a mirror with him and look at himself in the mirror, because a lot of wrestlers say that he had $1 million body, right? Which he was chiseled out. He was yoked up, but in my opinion, there's been different Lex Lugers, right? There was times where he was, he had nice size on him, everywhere, but he wasn't. If you notice, he would always flex like this. He would never flex, his arms too much, his biceps. In my opinion, he didn't have that much. His size wasn't as big. His arms, obviously, the Road Warriors, the Dingo Warrior, who became the Ultimate Warrior, Powers of Pain, even Hulk Hogan, Sid Vicious. Even these guys were way bigger than him, in my opinion. But later on, when the NWO came around, he got a lot bigger. And then he says in this interview, and I'm gonna post the link in the description so you guys can check it out yourself. It's with that dude Chris. I can't remember his last name, but he's the one that does all the interviews with the wrestlers. And he interviewed and went and worked out with Michael Hearn and all them. Anyways, he tells the story that when he went to the WWF, he was about 245, about 20 pounds he came down about 20, 25 pounds, which you can tell he looks even a lot thinner. And that he was drug free at that time, steroids, PEDs, he was not taking them because Vince McMahon was testing them, and I believe that trial just had ended not too long before that, or around that time. Hulk Hogan was gone doing movies at that time, so everybody was under the impression that Lex Luger was taking Hogan's place as the baby face of the WWF at the time. Originally, he signed up he signed with them with this bodybuilding thing that Vince McMahon had going on. If anybody don't know, Vince McMahon is I don't know how he looks now because he's almost 80 years old, but he used to be all into working out and nice size on him, big dude. Probably one of the only promoters or owners of a company at that time that that wasn't a ex wrestler that was in that type of shape, right? Even though he did become probably the biggest, if not the biggest, at one point, definitely in the top 10 of all time villains or heels of the wrestling business, right? When he had all this feuds going with Stone Cold and all that stuff. I wasn't watching it by that point. So, anyways, Lex Luger also told us in this interview that it was never, Vince McMahon never told him that he was going to give him the title. He never told him that, he was going to be taking Hogan's place as the number one guy in the company. Um, and that, and he was okay with what happened. I guess at one point, because there's pictures of him with the WWF title, but I guess it was he looked good in that build up to Lex Express and all that stuff, and the belt never got put on him legitly. I don't remember exactly what happened, but there was something, everybody thought he won it, but it wasn't legit or something like that. Because like I said, I've seen pictures with him with the wing belt on, and he says in his interview that he always wanted that belt too, just for his legacy, which he never got, but there's pictures of him with it. So he ends up leaving WWF after about 2 years and some change. Gets a phone call from Bischoff and tells him that we're going to start a Monday night program to go head to head with Raw, with WWF Raw, and that was going to be Monday Nitro. And so at first, they were like, oh, because prior to that, WCW, when Cowboy Bill Watts and all these other guys were running it, it was second, but it was a distant second from WWF. Everybody knows that's into wrestling, that once the NWO came involved with the WCW with Hogan and Macho Man and the Outsiders and all those guys, that they beat out WWF for 83 weeks straight in the ratings, right? And then eventually what happened was McMahon and them just beat them at their own game eventually, and then bottom out. And a lot of those guys came over to WCW, not Lex Luger though. And that was another question posed to him, like, why all these other guys came over? Why didn't you come over? And he said it was a real dark time for him. He was doing a lot of, I don't know if he was doing dope, but he was taking a lot of pills and getting strung out on pills, a lot of drinking. And then everybody knows that he ended up having a relationship with Miss Elizabeth, who used to be with the Macho Man. And she ends up dying at his house from an overdose. And so they, so a lot of people blamed him for that, which he understands where that stems from, and he totally gets it. And you know, he's got to live with that because some fans just still don't forgive him what happened to Miss Elizabeth. And and the thing is that he's this almost 270-pound dude that works out hard every day, heavy lifting, and you're talking about a woman that's half his size, and apparently from how he explained it, that she was doing it just as much as he was doing it. So everybody knows that body weight and all that matters when it comes to stuff like that, right? And so unfortunately, a lot of people's heard the phone call of him calling 911. She's not responsive. I don't know exactly what happened as far as what I've heard thus far is that, they fell asleep, and then when he woke up, he found her dead or not responsive, and then eventually she died. And so, this is something he has to live with, right? And so at the time back then, he's speaking about how it devastated him personally. Like he was so like, my career, nobody's gonna want to work with me now, and he had some things in the works that he was like, oh, it's done. They're not gonna want to work with me now after this comes to light about what was going on. And so he was talking about how he was just so worried about more about himself and where his career was gonna go than what happened with this lady and her untimely passing, right? So if anybody knows anything about Lex Luger and heard all these, because since probably 2000 now, maybe, or I don't know, maybe 2005, 2005, there's been a ton of shoot interviews with many different platforms on the internet with a bunch of wrestlers. Shoot means telling the truth, the real. Shoot just means real, okay? And they're telling the truth about how it was working with Lex Luger and this and that, right? And so a lot of people know already that Lex Luger was very conceited, very thought his shit didn't stink, thought he was better than people. And then he also talks in the video about, or in the interview, about how his father raised him and his brother, where that, if they were getting a beating for something or a whooping, they started crying, they would continue to get whooped until they stopped crying. So it made him and his brother, callous, I guess, and to not show emotion and pain into like crying and stuff like that, right? So uh, he goes to jail, gets out of jail, and I guess he met somebody there that was a chaplain. The guy wants to train him. The guy wants Luger to train him, and Luger's like, I'm not a personal trainer. And I guess he ended up finding him at a gym, and then he starts training him, and every day he would take him home or wherever he lived, and then he would go to Walmart. And every time this chaplain would go to Walmart, Lex Luger would never go in with him. If one day he finally asked him, Lex, why come you never go in the store with me? He goes, I don't do Walmart, man. He goes, that's for poor people. So I just said that to show where Lex Luger's mentality was. And so one day, I think this was in 2001, 2004, somewhere in the early 2000s. It was the very last time he did heavy workout, heavy weight, right? And he said that he had to catch a plane from Atlanta to the Bay Area, San Francisco, close to where I live, right? And while he was on the plane, he moved around a little bit. He was talking to somebody next to him, turned his head, and when he turned back, he said he felt a sharp stabbing type pain in the back of his neck and shoulder blades, in between the shoulders. He really didn't trip on it too much because he figured something with the weights or something like that. So he gets to San Francisco, checks in his hotel, goes to sleep, wakes up. He can't move from his head up, from his neck up. He can't move. And he said he was trying to move to get to the phone, and he said he was going to act like a SEAL and to dial 911 or get some type of help. And when he was trying to do that, he fell off the bed and got pinned kind of between the nightstand and the bed. And he says when somebody is a paraplegic from the neck up, it has a, let's see how he explained it. He said it puts a tremendous pressure or stress on your breathing. And so anyways, he couldn't do anything. He couldn't move. He couldn't really yell for help. But somebody came to his door, and he says he normally never locks his door in the motel room or the latch, And so when the people come, I don't know if it was the people that cleaning the room, but whoever it was, they come to the door and they know somebody's inside because the door, they can't open it because the latch. So divine intervention, call it what you want to, but I believe it did. There was a divine intervention there somehow. And he said he could barely say. He was just like, help. He could barely say it. And somehow the guy heard him, and they had to bust the door down, and they got him. Diamond Dallas Page was one of the first guys in the room, and he told him, you got to go to the hospital. Something's not right here. Took him to the hospital, and he became a paraplegic from the neck down. After some time, he starts getting progress, moving, standing up, moving a little bit, but he was taking a ton of falls. And then they took him to Stanford. I guess the ambulance drivers were old wrestling fans and recognized him, and they were trying to think of where the best place to take him. He was in San Francisco. They took him to Stanford, which is it's about I don't know exactly 45 minutes, maybe, depending what traffic looks like. It's a totally another county. It's San Mateo County. Actually, no, it might be Santa Clara County. East Palo Alto, it's Santa Clara County, because you got Palo Alto, Santa Clara County, which is Stanford's located, and then you got East Palo Alto, which is San Mateo County. So I believe it's Santa Clara County. So they take him there. It's it's a trauma, for spine cord injuries and head injuries. And so his doctor ends up telling him, like, man, you got to stop trying to move around and do things for yourself. You're falling too much. God forbid you end up falling and bust your head and getting a head injury. You know what I'm saying? So what ends up happening, he ends up taking the doctor's advice, and he stops trying to move around. And what ends up happening is you stop using muscles, you lose them. So then it became to the point where he was really bad as, a paraplegic. Now, again, after gaining the progress he gained, and if you ever seen Lex Luger at any of the signings, he would have to sign his signature with two hands. And so he finally, what ends up happening is he's in a room where he's sharing a room with three other guys, and a lot of these guys are really young people. At least he was already in his late 40s, I believe, at that time, right? Because he's 66, I think, now. So this happened about 18 to 22 years ago, something like that. So 40s, mid 40s. And so what ends up happening, he's feeling really down, really depressed, really dark. and I believe it was his physical therapist or one of the doctors that he was seeing. Somebody with the on the medical team, tells him like, man, you got a lot to live for. You got a purpose. You're there. You're here. You've already lived your life. These guys are young guys. Speak to them. Speak life back into them. And he finally realizes that he had a purpose. There's no need to be feeling down for himself. Considering. I mean, I had a cousin that wasn't paraplegic, but he was paralyzed from the waist down, and he had some episodes. I'm not going to get into his business, even though he's been gone already. What, 28 years now? 28 years. Uh, he just had some dark moments, many dark moments, and some issue and some situations where he injured himself very bad, but he couldn't feel it because he was paralyzed from the waist down. Nonetheless, um, if you have, obviously, if you haven't been there, you have no idea what these guys are going through, especially being the level that Lex Luger was at one time in his career. People are so independent and do things for themselves, and are has so much pride not to ask for help or whatever it is. People go through things, right? Well, what helped Sting, I mean, excuse me, what helped Lex Luger was uh, he gave his life. He became a born again Christian. But we have some other wrestlers that were legendary wrestlers from back then, Sting, and we got Nikita Koloff, who are both walk with the Lord, right? And Sting used to be Lex Luger's friend, one of his best friends, and he by Sting turning his life over to God, Lex Luger and Nikita Koloff both were able to speak to Lex, and Lex turned his life over, and so he's I mean, you can see the difference. This guy can't walk. He's got a lot of progress now where he's able to get up, thanks to DDP. DDP, if anybody don't know, he runs a yoga. Diamond Dallas Page runs the yoga. Ex wrestler, ex superstar who helped Jake the Snake Roberts, Scott Hall, Buff Bagwell, a few other guys, I'm pretty sure, to get sober and stay sober, right? Unfortunately, Scott Hall ended up passing, but Jake the Snake Roberts is still sober. He's got a gig going with All Elite Wrestling, right? Um, Bagwell is clean. He's, after 20 years of taking pills and drinking, he's clean. He's got his own podcast going, and since Lex has been working with DDP these last so many months, he's made a ton of progress where he's able to stand up now. He uses the walker, but still, he's able to stand up now. When he heats his coffee, he don't have to be reaching and spilling coffee all over himself. He can stand up, put the cup in the microwave, heat his water. He can brush his teeth standing up now. A lot of things that he's so grateful and humble that he's brought a great humbleness to his life, right? And it just goes to show you that it's possible. It's possible. Anything's possible with him. That's what That's what we're taught. And there's a lot of proof in the pudding with people's lives, right? That's changed their lives. I'm talking about real. I'm talking about real change. Where there's still a lot of people that real change, but I'm not talking about that funky stuff. I'm not talking about that. Have a mouthful of scripture, but your heart is full of hate. And hating other people because of the way they look. There's just a ton of that crap going on around right now, and it's more abundant than ever. You know what I'm saying? It's a shame how some things are going, but Lex Luger is yeah, at one point it was dark. He was depressed with the situation, and now he looks forward to every day. Every day that he wakes up, he looks forward to the day. Um, and just listen how he talks. I mean, you can just tell. Even though in pro wrestling, it's somewhat of an actor. They're somewhat of a character. They're playing their gimmick, whatever their gimmick is. You can tell that Lex Luger was that. He was, you know, it was easy to believe that that's what he was. Very conceited and very self-centered and stuff like that. Um, and to see him now in the condition that he was recently and how he's overcame, from his worst, to even though it might only to some might only seem to be a few inches from going from being from paralyzed from the neck down to now being able to stand up on your own, grabbing your walker and stand up on your own. That's tremendous stride, right? That's tremendous growth, tremendous, you know, uh, self, self determination. all that. You know what I mean? And to hear him confess and to say it, out loud on podcasts with uh, no hesitation. He says it like it is. How he feels the truth is, and I'm not saying that is the truth. That's his truth, and that's what we see as the truth. Those that are believers, right? So I just thought it was a hell of a story, man. That Lex Luger, because I knew he was in a wheelchair. I knew he was messed up, and I didn't know that it started off being a paraplegic, and then he gained a little bit, and it became a paraplegic again. I never knew why he was in a wheelchair. I thought maybe it had to do with with a injury in the ring or an injury with because of PEDs or something. I wasn't aware of that. So when I seen this interview, he broke down everything, and so like I said, I'm gonna put the link in the description. It's about an hour video, I guess. I recommend people checking it out. Um, and also, there's another video of him working with DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, on their rehabilitation um, with helping Lex Luger get back to standing up on his own and doing other things that he hasn't done in a long time. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and tap out. Just so you don't know, if you guys don't know, Lex Luger is the longest reigning United States heavyweight champion of the NWA. I believe he's held the big gold belt. He's held the NWA title belt, the one that Ric Flair had for years, off and on. And I believe he was a WCW champion as well. Once Ted Turner bought him out, bought the Jim Crockett promotion out. Eventually, after a few years, there was some issue with the NWA and the WCW, with that title. And then so the WCW came out with their own title, which Sting held for a while. Big Van Vader had for a while. Ron Simmons took it from Van Vader, then Big Van Vader got it back. And so that was a totally different title. Also, Ravishing Rick Rude had the big gold belt, and then I think he lost it. That's when it all started happening, was when Rick Rude had it. That's when the issues came up between the NWA and WCW. And then shortly after that, they came out with the WCW belt. I might be a little bit off on the time because I wasn't watching wrestling at that time. But this is a great story. It's a great motivator for people that are, having issues and problems and with depression and with anything. You know what I'm saying? It gives you that light of hope at the end of the tunnel. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, Big Lou tapping out.